A small American town, 15 years ago. Michael? Halloween.
Hello, fellow listeners, and welcome back to Feed the Dark podcast. This episode is extremely special for a number of reasons. Three reasons, actually. Three numbers. One is that I don't have my usual background. The second reason is because we will be talking about a film instead of a work of literature. And finally, the third. You may have noticed before how I said we. That was not a mistake. There is, in fact, a man sitting next to me. His name is Sean Attri. He is my first guest that I'm having on the podcast.
Hey.
So we are going to be talking about one of our favorite films of all time, Halloween. Mr. Sean Attri, would you like to express to the audience why I chose you for this specific episode?
Reason why I'm here is, I think I showed this movie to you, right? Didn't I?
You did.
Way back in the day.
Oh yeah, you
I
were
don't
the
fucking
first.
remember when. This movie fucked me up from when I was a child. I remember watching this movie ever so vividly the first time. 7 years old, just by myself. We used to have an old, big bay window in our old living room, which I know that you remember.
I do.
Very well. And I don't know why, but my parents left me watching this movie by myself on a dark, stormy night.
It's fine. My brother put on Jaws for me when I was
Well,
in
yeah,
elementary
you had
school.
the brother that introduced us to new metal.
Different than
So-
parents, okay.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, different set of parents. My parents do not like horror movies, as you know. This movie, I watched by myself, 7 years old, big bay windows, and I just imagined Michael Myers' face in that bay window after the movie ended. Like, I could not get that image out of my head. It fucked me up for days. And my life, maybe. The rest of my life, who knows?
Not as important. My introduction to Michael Myers was actually not from the movie. It was from this man. I saw him at a few Halloween parties in a row with the Michael Myers mask on. It was definitely middle school.
I did have this Michael Myers mask for 6th and I guess 7th grade.
Yeah, no, it was back in our private school days. So it was
Okay, 7th
So
grade.
I think I might have seen
It
that.
was very
film.
intimidating, just walking
7th
around.
grade?
It actually worked out very well because I was an introvert at the time, so it worked to just not talk to anybody.
So we thought
Just-
he was Michael Myers. So it was
No one else knew who I was. They didn't get the joke. It was a joke.
So
It was a joke.
So if you live on a completely different planet and for some reason are watching this podcast on horror and don't even know what Halloween is about, it was originally called The Babysitter Killers, and that is pretty self-explanatory. By today's standards, in terms of plot, it's about a man who escapes from a mental asylum and haunts a town on Halloween night and kills babysitters. That's basically the gist of it. I mean, it has a much deeper
If you'll
themes.
simplify it.
Yeah, it's a simplification, but it has much deeper themes, and I mean, it's more famous for many other things we'll get into, such as the music and cinematography, blah blah blah. But would you have anything to add to the plot?
I would like to.
Yeah, so it's not. I mean, this is like in my top 5 favorite horror films of all time. So I'm
I
not
love
talking
it.
shit. Not talking shit. But I'm just saying it's not known for the plot.
It's not a complex story.
So as you guys may know, and as this man right here knows,
Maybe.
movies such as The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Black Christmas, Peeping Tom, and many others, they're films that came out before this one. But Halloween, even though it came out after these films, it is still credited as a movie that has spearheaded the entire subgenre of slashers, and is still credited as creating many of the tropes now that we will talk about. But they were not tropes when this film came out. So speaking of which, first I want to ask you what you find the most unique about this film, and why this film sticks with you, even though it has become um, not generic, but a lot of the things in this movie have become a bit of cliches. Like, what makes this specifically stand out to you?
I think what really gets to me is the point of view that you get from Michael Myers. I think this just immerses you into the horror more so than any of the other slashers.
Mm-hmm.
Freddy Krueger, I mean, fucking all the Friday the 13th movies. You get an occasional glimpse, at least from the Friday the 13th movies, from that person, from the horror person's perspective, from the monster's perspective, if you will. But really, Halloween is the only one that consistently gives you that over-the-shoulder shot, not of the protagonist, but the antagonist, but of the villain, of the monster.
Yeah.
Most horror, just in general, I mean, you're talking about, I know, literature is your thing. Most literature, unless we're talking about Frankenstein, for instance, doesn't really give you that over-the-shoulder perspective of the horror antagonist.
No, because a lot of people's philosophy, a lot of writers, is that, you know, the more unseen it is, or the more unknown it is, it's scarier, which is true.
That's true. I mean,
it sort of applies here as well. But also at the same time, I think that the mixture of having that point of view from Michael Myers, especially in 1978, which is 42 years old now, which is, I mean, just think about that, how crazy that is. But I think that adds a different element to it, and I totally agree with what you're saying.
Yeah.
With what you're saying. And I think John Carpenter did a lot of things in this movie to add on to that even more. One of which is his score. If you guys don't know, John Carpenter writes his own music. And one of the things that he popularized in the 80s that he's credited for is creating music, like a theme song, for the monster. So this may sound cheesy in you know, some other films, like I know there are a lot of Friday the 13th fans out there. I'm sorry. I just saw the first one this past Friday.
The first one?
The first one has some fans. It's
Really?
a classic. But the whole...
Dude.
as
a meme.
As
fantastic.
a meme, it's a fantastic meme.
Fantastic meme.
Yeah.
Honestly,
yeah.
I'm going to go out on a limb here. Stab me if you will. You're recording this in the Ides of March. I will say. The reboot is maybe my favorite.
I would agree with that. Friday 6 is awesome. And all the Tom Savini gore in 1 and 4 rules. The remake is far superior.
Oh, stand by that opinion.
Oh,
steadfastly.
As do I. Now, fuck you, original Friday the 13th
It's not
fans.
that great.
No one
like
at our age likes it.
Best part of that whole genre.
This brings me back,
okay,
actually.
sorry.
That was actually a good idea.
Of that whole series.
Yeah.
Is
I have a design of Jason I dig. But that's about it.
Okay, the hockey mask, simple yet effective. I'll give it that.
I dig that. Oh,
a ripoff though.
No, that's why I actually like that you brought that up. So, it's funny that I just brought up Friday the 13th, because Friday the 13th is openly a ripoff of Halloween, more so than any other slasher in the 80s. Only because the director is so open about this. He was saying, yeah, I kind of wanted to do a Halloween, and he kind of keeps saying that. So, but this also brings me back to the music, actually, which was the original point of this entire conversation. So, even though Nightmare on Elm Street is one of my all-time favorites, and I love that film, and spoiler alert for another episode, that will appear on my top 10 horror films of all time. That being said, the music they use for Freddy, the music they use for Jason, the music they use for so many other slasher killers, it never even touches the stratosphere of the music that John Carpenter created for Michael Myers. I mean, I don't even know what it is about this. I mean, I know that John Carpenter filmed this in an on-time signature, but that doesn't even encompass why I think this is such a large percentage of what makes this movie so terrifying.
To your point, John Carpenter did have that off 4/4 signature. It's that 5/4 that made things a little bit weird. It was around the time that Led Zeppelin was making music in 6/8, and other time signatures that were a little bit off, but that was a little bit more bluesy, a little bit easier. The 5/4 added a little of extra beat that people weren't used to. Kind of makes people uncomfortable.
It's a bit off-putting for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean that, plus the simplicity of it. I mean, fuck. Everyone knows that Halloween theme. I feel like even people that have never seen the movie knows that it's creepy. They could hear that theme alone and know that it's related to a horror movie.
Yeah, I don't want to put on the same level as Jaws because that is more recognizable in my opinion. It's close to that level of popularity.
Yeah, I mean, I might not have the Jaws level of like recognition in terms of, oh, that's the soundtrack from Jaws, but they'll know like, I feel kind of weird about listening to this.
Yeah,
let's not throw this on a party. At my parties, we blast that shit.
Yeah, for sure. So jumping off of one more thing you said, you did mention that this came out in the 1970s, and this is actually why I found this to be a little bit more unique than later slashers. Not to be too discriminatory towards 80s slashers, I love my 80s slashers, but for films in the 1970s, this era is very well known for being super un-Hollywood for a time in Hollywood. For instance, this is when A Clockwork Orange came out, and it's when a number of other, like Taxi Driver, and it was just an era of...
It was after all the big studios fell apart.
Yeah, it was an era of downers. I mean, a lot of slashers end with the female protagonist kind of being victorious, and this doesn't even end in that way. I feel like this fits in more into the 70s genre as a whole than it does into generic slashers, partially because of that reason, and because of the ambiguous ending. And I kind of wanted to hear your thoughts on how this fits into 70s film, because of the reputation of 1970s film.
Well, I mean, especially because this movie came out in 1979, right at the end of the 70s. I mean, this kind of ushered in the 80s. In terms of 70s film, I mean, you had psychological horrors just like Rosemary's Baby that really fucked with audiences. Yeah. I mean, this was the movie that kind of
Oh, and The Exorcist as well.
Of course.
Yeah.
Between Rosemary's Baby and The Exorcist, I mean, you had so many movies that really just like upended American life.
So you mentioned something earlier that I kind of want to use as a jumping off point. You did mention again that this film was released in the 1970s, and this was an era that is sort of known, at least among the darker films, to be very un-Hollywood and even a bit European in the filmmaking style. I mean, there was a French Connection, there was A Clockwork Orange, there was The Exorcist, there was the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is a very different tone than the 1980s, which is a bit more fun and upbeat. And I kind of wanted to hear your perspective of Halloween being a slasher film before slasher films really existed, existing in the 1970s, and what that did for that movie, and if you had any opinions on that matter, and if that affected it at all, actually.
Well, I feel like the 1970s did have a lot more complexity in terms of the actual like judgment that it put on the characters. The 80s was kind of just like, well, the characters are fun, the characters are gonna do whatever the fuck they're gonna do, and the audience is just there separate to watch the characters do whatever they do. I mean, Halloween is very unique in the fact that it does have that point of view. I mean, especially all those point of view shots, those over-the-shoulder shots of Michael, where you just watch him. I mean, he's basically judging people. I mean, even from the very first kill of his sister. I mean, you see him with the very first person point of view to the point where he's even putting on the mask, and you have that that filter going through there.
One of the most intense openings of any film.
Of course, a classic. And the fact that you really have that kind of going through the whole movie. There are some people that he kills, some people that he doesn't, but it's really a matter of sexuality, I guess, one thing. Like responsibility in general. Judith is his sister. for people that aren't as
By the
familiar
way,
and fluent with the movie.
Leave my podcast if you haven't seen this movie. Go away.
Please, get out.
So, it should be noted that Robert Eggert, among many other famous film critics, actually, they did love this film, except they didn't like the effect it had. They criticized pretty much the entire slasher genre, and in that, they summarized horror as a whole for probably 2 decades straight, through the 90s. And they said that the entire genre was sexist. And these are mainly due to the tropes that Halloween has caused through the fault of the filmmaker or not, or through the intentions of the filmmaker or not, I should say. Another addition is that John Carpenter and all the actors and actresses involved deny any implicit morality that they put on the sexuality of the characters, which has led to much criticism and it has led to many academic articles that were very well researched and accredited articles that I have read in preparation for this video, but it never was the intention of the filmmakers. They just said they wanted to set out to make a scary horror film, but still it has spearheaded this entire trope for decades to come. Not just the 80s, I would argue the 90s as well, until Wes Craven made Scream. So I kind of wanted to know what your interpretation of that is, or what your feelings on the claims of sexism against this film, and because of this film, the decades of sexism in horror, supposed sexism to come.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the claims of sexism on this film are kind of ridiculous, especially considering that there are 4 teenagers that are actually killed in this movie, and they're equal parts male as they are female.
Yeah.
Yes, those males and those females both didn't engage in sexual intercourse.
Also, before I move this point to Sean, I do just want to say that there are many feminists who come out in a backlash to the film critics' backlash claims of sexism against the slasher genre. Most notably, there was Professor Carol Clover, and in her novel Men, Women, in Chainsaws, she actually is the one who points out that men die in slasher movies as well, almost to the exact level that female characters do. And to quote her, she said, "Killing those who seek or engage in unauthorized sex amounts to a generic imperative of the slasher film. It is an imperative that crosses gender lines, affecting males as well as females. The numbers are not equal, and the scenes are not equally charged, but the fact remains that in most slasher times after 1978, following Halloween, men and boys who go after the wrong kind of sex also die." So she actually views this as empowering, because she views the people who die in these acts it's more so a morality based on people who view sex incorrectly, both men and women. And it's more of a critique on that. And also due to the fact that both genders die almost at an equal rate. So those were her defenses in defense of the slasher genre.
I mean, I definitely would not say that this movie is really even against sexism. Definitely. Okay, I definitely wouldn't say that this movie is, a rallying cry against sexism. Like, this is a patriarchal film. Like, please, come on. This movie is not, a movie representing the patriarchy that's saying that women are going to die. That would essentially be the equivalent of someone saying that's sexist.
I don't think it's that straightforward either. I agree with that. But
no one is that, no one's that simple-minded.
No, I think it's,
okay.
Yeah.
While I'm not going to claim that people are saying that this movie is just strictly misogynistic and that, whatever, only women deserve to die, I don't think anyone's saying that. Anyone rational is saying that. I don't think that critics are saying that promiscuous women deserve to die in this film. Nor do I really think that this movie is saying that even promiscuous males are deserving to die. I mean, come on, it's fucking horny teenagers. They're gonna have sex.
Yeah.
They're gonna do whatever they need to do.
No, I just think it's this movie got a lot of flack only because it's kind of invented that whole concept, and this was the first, not from Ebert, but from other critics, to be clear. So I think it's because a lot of the murder came about during some, or because of some of the sex scenes, and some viewers viewed that as some sort of punishment for a sin or some bullshit like that. And once again, I think this movie does it more responsibly, and I believe John Carpenter, and I believe Jamie Lee Curtis, and everyone else involved, and they said they weren't attempting to say anything of that lines. But the fact is, it did inspire an entire generation of filmmakers.
It's just what teens do.
True, but it did inspire an entire generation of, just nonstop tits and nonstop just slaughter. Like, I think it inspired exploitive films because morons didn't understand what this film was trying to do. But that's my interpretation. I gave it away.
I get why people got it.
Yeah.
I mean, it definitely makes sense as to why teens watch this movie because they really feel like teens. That's what teens want to do. They just want to have sex all the time.
And by the way, teens did watch this movie. This is the highest grossing independent film of that time. It got it got taken over actually by the Blair Witch Project, which is also another horror film. By the way, these are not in terms of horror films. Both of these movies were the highest grossing independent films of any genre. So, hooray for us. So, one of the reasons why I love this movie so much, probably, maybe not the main, but up there, is this man right here, and how, in my view, he's not really so much of a character. He's more of a metaphor for death. What do you think of Michael Myers as a concept? Especially because how he's labeled in the film, if you don't know, is just the shape. And I think that's one of the most interesting aspects. That's part of why I want to talk about this, is because I think that makes this film as a whole more literary. But I don't want to give too much of my opinion. Sean, I want to hear your interpretation of that whole concept and theme.
Yeah, well, as you said, right on the nose. I mean, he's even cast in the final credits. He's cast as the Shape.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he's not Michael Myers. He's not the serial killer. He's not the bad guy. He's the Shape. He is the image of evil that you have in your mind at night.
Right. Yeah.
I mean, Dr. Loomis sums it up perfectly. You know, in the very first scene you see with Dr. Loomis, even in reference to Michael Myers, the evil, he has escaped from here. He's gone from here. He refers to him as specifically the evil.
It's escaping me right now, but there was another line about his eyes. However,
Oh yeah.
Yeah, there was a few lines in there that really led you to believe that he was just more of a concept than an actual being. The most obvious is the fact that he could drive a car without lessons, but that's another story. Sorry,
Dr. Loomis in general just kind of helps serve as an expository character for Michael Myers. He is the one who expresses just how truly evil he is. He tells the audience what they need to be worried about. He tells the audience exactly how evil he is. He tells that guy right off the bat that is evil that has walked away. When he's talking about Michael Myers' eye, when he's talking about the fact that he's spent the first half of his career with Michael, trying to help him, and then the second half of it, trying to keep him locked away, because he knew that it was evil.
Yeah, no, I do think that exemplifies Michael as more of an idea than an actual villain, which to me makes him scarier than even some of my favorite films. Michael Myers is interesting because he's not cartoonishly indestructible as later interpretations of his character will be, such as Jason, the director of and many zombie-esque movies and many other slasher characters that are emulating Michael Myers. But I never think I really capture what's so terrifying about him, because there are many instances where Michael is stabbed. He gets stabbed maybe 3 or 4 times at the end of this film by Jamie Lee Curtis. Once with a coat hanger, once with a knife, a couple times with a knife. But he never, it never seems like it doesn't faze him. It seems as if he is affected or feigning the fact that it actually affected him, and because of John Carpenter's cinematography, and you see him rising like Nosferatu or The Undertaker. But,
Undertaker's a direct ripoff.
Yeah, Undertaker definitely rips us off. I think that adds a different layer of terror to the character, and I kind of want you to hear your thoughts on why his indestructibility doesn't come off as cheesy at all, or if you do, then expand upon that thought.
It was necessarily cheesy. You know that it's coming after a while, almost to the point that you're yelling at the screen. Maybe it's a meme at this point. I mean, and you could argue that Halloween made that meme of the fact that don't leave the goddamn knife right where the goddamn guy who's dead can go and grab it.
Yeah,
or don't leave the sewing needle, etc. Mm-hmm. Don't leave it right in front of him. You know that he's gonna. You kind of slowly over the course of the movie gain that aura as an audience as to his indestructibility. At first, he's stabbed in the eye with that little needle, whatever, that Lori has from her yarn ball, and that seems to put him down real easily, given she puts down the goddamn butcher knife real idiotically. Like, everyone is yelling at her, don't put it down, but she leaves it right there for him. That's fine. He gets up, clearly, picks it back up, goes back after her. She stabs him with a coat hanger in the eye, and then stabs him again, with his own knife in the chest. It hurts real close to the chest.
Yeah, indeed.
With his own knife, no less. But then, of course, she drops it. Just for him to get it again. But then, he picks it up again. And he has that invincibility. Of course, the invincibility most is realized when he is shot 6 times. Not to mention probably in the head as well. One would figure. And then falls off a 2-story balcony. Hits the ground and is up a minute later. I mean, if that ain't indestructibility, I don't know what is. That's pretty good.
Yeah. No, I do think it adds to the terror. Just the subtlety of that, though. Just the fact that, once again, even at the ending, the fact that he totally disappears from the scene. He doesn't just keep going back, and there's not some over-the-top attempt to, have like a military put him into the ground. Cough Friday the 13th. Go fuck yourself. But, yeah. No, but I think it differs from that. And once again, I think it kind of fools you at certain scenes.
Well, again, it kind of goes with the whole theme of the movie where you really don't know what to expect.
Yeah.
You don't know at any point if he's actually dead. You don't know what he can do, who he can kill, when he can kill them, how he's doing any of the things. It really complements this aura of mystery. Of you don't know what to expect. You don't know where any of this shit is coming from. You don't know how any of this stuff is happening. And yet it's still happening. And you still have these very real, seemingly real teenage girls, at least in the 1970s.
No, definitely. They brought their own clothes on set. They brought their own cars on set. They filmed in real homes. I mean, they really made this as authentic as possible for the 1970s.
Full disclaimer, I was not a teenager in the 1970s.
Oh, no, nor was I. I found this out later, but yeah. But, I definitely think that adds to it. But this kind of brings me to my next question, because I don't have many flaws of this movie at all. This might be my top 5. I'm still organizing my top 10 horror films of all time. That video is coming very soon.
Gotta have that list.
I love lists.
Very well defined. If it ain't defined, it ain't a list.
But I would be willing to bet that this movie is in my top 5. I mean, making a top 10? I think this makes the top 5 of my horror films. So I do have a flaw with this movie, even though I do rank it that highly. And that to me might not be a flaw to you. I'm kind of curious on your perspective of this. Because of everything you just mentioned about him being in personification of death, and because of how John Carpenter filmed that, and because of how he filmed his indestructibility in a more sophisticated way, as you've just illustrated. I'm not personally a fan of the fact that we see his face as an adult when the mask comes off for a split second. And I want to hear what your thoughts on that are.
Yeah, it is a very interesting choice. I mean, you have Michael Myers almost more of an idea than you have as an actual person. Yes, you see him as a 6-year-old boy with his face for less time than you see from his own perspective. Get a little bit, but otherwise, between Dr. Loomis and really all of the over-the-shoulder perspectives, you don't get a good sense of the fact that you're actually looking in on someone. You're actually getting that perspective. Yes, the over-the-shoulder perspectives, you might see Michael from over the back left of his shoulder. But you don't actually understand whose perspective you're looking from. When you do see his face at the end, you realize that he is a human being. Deformed and awful looking as he may be. He is still a human being.
Yeah. Once again, I don't particularly love that, only because there are certain shots where, mostly only in the first film, where, for instance, there's that one shot of his mask just slowly fading into frame and nothing else. And I don't know if it really works for me that we see him, even if deformed or not. I kind of like him more as an idea than just a guy. So, do you like that choice? Or I know you said it was an odd choice. I don't know if would you have preferred that to be different, or do you actually enjoy how that was
It is a bit jarring for me, personally. Honestly, it's hard to say because I love Halloween. As much as I think this movie is a masterpiece, and as much as I love this as one of my very favorite horror movies, or let alone Halloween movies, could I do without Laurie unmasking Michael? I probably could.
Yeah.
That one half a shot. I probably could. It doesn't really add anything for me. Yes, it humanizes Michael a little bit, but if anything, that takes away from the fact of him being the shape.
Right, yeah. No,
it's... we talked about it earlier. It makes him more human than it does make him a force.
No, I agree. And the reason why I was harping on that so hard is because this movie basically has no flaws except for that one scene that, personally for me, is the only thing that I could think of other than some hilarious acting, which I should go ahead and add to it. But that's the only thing for me that
it's a classic.
Makes me kind of question, like, what kind of choice was that? We talked about Michael a lot, and we talked about why he was memorable and an icon of a genre. But we didn't really talk too much about Laurie. We talked about sexism and whether the slasher genre as a whole was sexist or not. We talked a little bit about Final Girls. We didn't really talk about the OG Final Girl, Jamie Lee Curtis. And I kind of want to ask you why she is remembered throughout generations, why she inspired the entire concept of Final Girls, and if you find any reasons at all why she really stands out among the plethora of female protagonists, and why this inspired an entire subgenre of not just films per se, but just really an entire role for female actresses.
Yeah, I mean, you could say, of course, that she is quite the scream queen. She does have, a very good expression of fear and terror. But the fact that her character is so well developed and so fleshed out, where you actually care about who she is, you actually get to know a good sense of who Jamie Lee Curtis's character is. You know who Laurie is. She is the nerdy girl who hangs out after school. She's not only the nerdy girl who makes sure that she's taking care of her own responsibility, but will even take on the responsibility of others. And I mean, I think that really is one of the themes of the movie. It's not necessarily who has sex, who doesn't have sex. It's more Michael judging people in a way and the audience, because we are seeing so much of this movie from Michael's perspective, judging who's accepting the responsibility and who's not accepting the responsibility.
No, I actually totally agree with that. And this is why I really take John Carpenter and the rest of the cast and crew's claims that this had no intention of being a moral tale, that it had no intention of having any moral stance on sexuality, especially teenage sexuality, to heart, or that it didn't have any stance on sin, like many people claim. I think it was really just analyzing this one character who stuck to her responsibilities, was more of an adult figure, and as some of the other cast members has mentioned, it's not that they were sinning by having sex, it's that teenagers have sex, and they didn't really give it. They really didn't give a shit to the point of where they didn't even notice that there was a mass fucking killer roaming the streets. So I think that was more of the message that no one took away for 2 decades straight, perhaps even further. Yeah, I mentioned it went through the 90s, and now when I'm thinking about it, it actually went through the 2000s as well. It wasn't really until the 2010s until it was totally changed into, thank you to A24 and so, or other companies. But no, I totally agree with your analysis of Jamie Lee Curtis's character. I really think she had a strong presence because of her responsibilities, and I think that makes her unique even among final girls. As someone who just watched Friday the 13th, this past Friday the 13th, she didn't even have those qualities of strength and of maturity. I mean,
I'm
maybe
sorry.
It was
what is the name
strength.
even?
No one
of
knows.
The girl from Friday the 13th?
Yeah, that's actually a bad example because it's so bad. But no, okay, so what I'm trying to say is that many other final girls have this perceived strength, like only because they
Virtual.
the term
it's
you
very
use,
superficial is really what
Yeah.
it comes down to.
But the term you use, responsibility, I think sticks to that character and really makes her stand out more so than anything that I've even thought of on my own. I think that really encapsulates a character, and I think that's a main reason why she's stuck in so many people's minds. She comes across as an adult more so than any other final girl I could think of, and unless you're including Sigourney Weaver and whatever. But
Alien?
besides the point. Yeah, I barely view her as a
She's
final
not
girl.
the final girl in Ghostbusters, I'll tell you that much.
I mean, once again,
Final dog.
Yeah, Alien's a bit of a story, but
Final human.
but I did want to bring that up because I feel that the entire Next Generation totally misinterpreted why Michael Myers was scary as an indestructible, speechless villain, and I also think they misinterpreted the entire reason why the final girl was a memorable concept to begin with. The scariest scenes for me were the stalking scenes in the very beginning. I don't know if you had anything to say about that. It was just more of an aside than an actual talking topic. But I would feel really bad if I had an entire episode on Halloween and if I didn't mention the fact that Michael Myers was appearing and disappearing behind sheets and that slow, eerie buildup that is there's so dearly missed among so many other films where teenagers get stabbed to death.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have certain scenes that are the jump scares.
Mm-hmm.
You even have some cheap jump scares in the movie. I will
Carpenter
admit,
does
for
that.
as much as I love, that random thing that hits the window when the police officer is in Michael Myers' old house with Loomis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a cheap jump scare.
For sure.
But then you also have, on the other hand, you have Michael Myers being in Laurie's lawn with behind all of the laundry line. And
Yeah, that's just for me. That's okay. So I like the closet scene a little bit more, but that's up there in my top 3-4 scenes of the movie. I love that scene.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of my very favorite. And then, of course, that juxtaposed with Michael appearing and then disappearing behind even just the hedgerows. When Laurie's walking with Annie just down the street. And, all of a sudden you see him for a second. Music cuts in. And then the music cuts out. And then, Annie walks up. The audience doesn't see what Annie sees. Mm-hmm. As far as we know. Who knows?
If you have any final thoughts before we close out, before you pass out, please let the audience know.
I assume everyone has watched Halloween at this point, so yeah. I don't have very much to say. It's really just an appreciation of that movie. If you haven't watched it every Halloween, on Halloween, please do so.
Thank you for welcoming my guest, Sean Attri. Thank you for listening to us discuss a film instead of a literary work.
Thank God.
Thank God. So, but for real, thank you so much again, as always, for tuning in to Feed the Dark podcast. I really appreciate it. Sean really appreciates it. You could find me on the YouTubes at Feed the Dark. You can find me on Gmail at feedthedark30, because Feed the Dark was already taken.
The first 29 of
the
them
first 29
were
all taken. So it's feedthedark30 at gmail.com. You can also find me on Twitter. You can find me on Spotify. You can find me on Apple Music. And you can find me on Libsyn. Thank you again.